Hello, my name's Amy and welcome to another writing vlog. Now I say another, but it's actually weeks and weeks since I last filmed. There are a few different reasons for that, some good and some bad. So I thought it would be a great time to sit down with a cup of coffee and chat about what I've been up to and take you along on today's writing adventures. I'm hoping to get a lot of words in today. So let's start very briefly with why I haven't been filming. You may be able to tell that I'm still sounding a little bit croaky, and that is because I have been ill recently. The other thing really though is that life has just been busy. We're really starting to make progress with our barn that we're going to be turning into our home. We finally got the planning permission for that, and I keep meaning to make an entire video about that process, but I just haven't got to it yet. But we are now moving forwards, things are happening, lots of big bills to pay. But it finally feels like we've got off the ground. And between that and work, I have also been writing a lot. That really is the biggest reason I haven't been filming, is that I've very much been focused on my fiction. So first of all, I'm still hard at work on Project Moon. I am now around 10,000 words away from the end of the first draft of the second book. I'm hoping to have that done by the end of May. I'm pretty much on track for that. I don't think I'll have any problem hitting that deadline. And I'm also on track to release the first book sometime in June. I don't have an exact date, but things are slowly coming together. I still need to do the proofread, and my cover is not quite finished. My cover artist slash designer slash partner has been working on this for a few weeks. It's taken a different turn than we initially expected, but it's looking really good. So that's in the works. I have written the blurb. I have written a short story, which I am hoping to use as a newsletter freebie for people who have read the first book. That hasn't been edited yet, and I don't know how happy I am with it, but I do have the first draft, so that's something. So I'm definitely making progress. It's going to be a really big summer for writing, with another book release coming out and getting the second book ready, which I'm hoping to release in November. And as if all of that wasn't enough, I've also just started another first draft. Now this is something really just for fun. I've been reading lots of thrillers lately, and I really fancied writing something in a thriller or murder mystery vein. But this is me, so every time I try to write an ordinary thriller, and I have had plenty of ideas for them, they always fall apart. I get bored within the first 5,000 to 10,000 words. So my solution has been to take a murder mystery plot and set it in a more fantastical setting. It's kind of urban fantasy, it's a village with lots of witches. So from my initial idea of it being a kind of cozy murder mystery, it has now become a kind of witchy murder mystery. It's probably a little bit darker than my initial idea. But when I first thought about writing some kind of thriller or murder mystery, I was thinking about publishing it, if I ever do publish it, under a pen name. I've now come back from that idea, and I'm thinking if I make it a little bit darker, creepier and more fantastical, it would actually be fine published under my own name with all my science fiction and fantasy. And also, funnily enough, I mentioned writing a romance in a vlog several months ago. That didn't ultimately go anywhere, but I did really like the village setting. So what better place to set a witchy murder mystery than in a fictional village I've already developed? So the romance is actually being useful here. None of the characters are carrying over, but the setting is pretty much the same, just now with witches and magical creatures. It's also set in a much wider multiverse that I've been working on for a few years. I haven't finished anything in this particular setting because I now am up to 3 different multiverses with many, many different series and books in each of them. But this particular one has a more urban fantasy or even alt history vibe than anything I've written before. It's complicated, it needs a lot of thought. Writing any kind of alt history is really interesting to me because I studied history at uni, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of thought. The witchy murder mystery does not really delve into all the details of this multiverse. It takes place really on the edges. There's a little bit of politics and magic going on in the background of the world, but I'm trying to keep the plot relatively simple, more focused on the murder mystery and on the characters in the village. So that's my fun background project right now. If it goes well, I may publish it this year. It would be a really nice thing to publish or give away to my newsletter subscribers in October because it's going to be witchy and creepy. But honestly, if this story never gets off the ground, I'm not too worried because my big focus right now is Project Moon and that's going really well. So I have now been talking for ages and it is time to get on with some writing. As I said before, I really want to get lots of words done today, so let's get to it. I've just finished my first 20-minute sprint. I have about 800 words for the day so far. I'm not sure I wrote all of those in that sprint. In fact, I know I didn't because I wrote a little bit first thing this morning. But I think I must have got somewhere between 600 and 700 words in those 20 minutes, so that's good going. Also, very excitingly, I have just passed 50,000 words in the draft. Now, this isn't going to be a very long draft. I'm aiming for around 60,000 words. The first book in the series came in at almost exactly 60,000 in the first draft, but then I added a lot in edits. The final total was about 74 or 75,000 in that book, so I'm expecting the same thing to happen here. I'm aiming for a relatively short first draft between 55 and 60,000 words, and then I will add a considerable amount in edits when I decide where I need extra content. Because I have discovered that I pretty much always make books longer in edits. I think of more scenes I want to add, more character development that's needed. I very rarely cut things. So if I write a first draft that's 100,000 words long, the book will end up at 120,000 words. So particularly because this is going to be a 6-book series, it's in my interests to keep the first drafts relatively short, knowing that they will get considerably bigger when I edit them. And I expect they will get longer as the series goes along as well, because that's pretty common in fantasy and I found it in my own books too. So that was a good start to the morning. I am trying to pace myself because it's going to be a long writing day. I don't have a lot else to do today. I'm probably going to take a break, maybe do some yoga. I have just twinged something in the back of my shoulder, bottom of my neck, possibly by lifting up my 4-year-old. So I want to make sure that doesn't get any worse, and I found yoga is really good for neck and shoulder injuries. So I'm just going to take things easy. I will get back to another sprint soon, but first it's time for a bit of a break. It's now Saturday evening and I thought it was about time I sat down and wrapped up this vlog properly. Yesterday I wrote about 3,000 words altogether. 2,000 of those were on Project Moon, the second book, and about 1,000 were on the Witchy Murder Mystery. I'm very happy with that as a total. I typically get one writing day a week when my daughter is not here. And over the last few weeks, I have been gradually building up the number of words I write on those days. Last week I did 2,000, this week it was 3,000. It's not going to keep going up every single week, but I'd like to get up to maybe 4,000 or 5,000. What I did want to point out though, and it's one of the reasons I turned this into a weekend vlog instead of just a one-day vlog, is that today I've only written about 250 words, and this is pretty typical for me. When I have had a really big writing day or a few decent writing days in a row, I then tend to have a day when I write very little, and that was today. So we went out for a walk in the woods, which you have already seen the footage of. It was really beautiful and peaceful and incredibly green. It kind of feels quite summery out there already, even though we are still in the middle of May. But the final thing I really wanted to talk about is a film I watched last night, which was Tolkien. Now, if you haven't seen anything about this film, it is a fictionalized, probably fairly heavily fictionalized version of Tolkien's early years between his time at school up to him starting to write The Hobbit. Now, I really enjoyed the film. It's quite emotional. I really liked seeing elements of Tolkien's fiction woven into the film. They're quite subtle, but I think the more you know about The Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth and everything he created, the more allusions you are going to see to his work in the film. But what really struck me is how much I enjoyed the sections that were about academia. Now, I've been kind of fascinated recently by the idea of light academia and this kind of romanticization of studying and learning. And for a little while I thought maybe I wanted to write a light academia book, but then I realised the more I thought about this that it's not the fiction I want, it's to actually live that lifestyle. And watching Tolkien really brought that back to me because I enjoyed all the sections of debate and learning and studying so much. And I have seen online a lot of love for light academia recently. Recommendations for music and films that embody the idea of this genre, if you can call it that. But also study vloggers are very popular, particularly the ones who have a very aesthetic slant on studying. Ruby Granger immediately springs to mind. And I've been thinking a lot about why this is so appealing. Now, obviously, I think the aesthetic is part of it. The whole cottagecore and simple living and getting back to basics and a bit of a more old-fashioned way of life have all been really popular over the last couple of years, and I think the pandemic is responsible for a lot of that. So light academia does have that aesthetic of a slightly old-fashioned clothing, of writing by hand, of reading old books, writing with a fountain pen. And I am slightly attracted to that. I like some of those things. I certainly like old books and fountain pens. I'm less interested in the fashion, but I can see why the overall aesthetic is so attractive to people. But I also think there are other aspects that are very interesting. For one thing, I think the focus on studying is kind of a reprieve from real-world cares and responsibilities. It is definitely very appealing to get up in the morning and think the only important thing you have to do that day is study. Now, I know there's a lot of stress that can come along with studying and trying to get good grades, but to me that was always a very different stress to, say, worrying about going to work or having to commute or financial troubles. Particularly in a genre like light academia, there is very much a focus on the studying and nothing else. The characters we see in these situations are not trying to hold down a job at the same time as studying. They're not typically worried too much about money, maybe they have a scholarship, or maybe money is simply never mentioned. There's often quite an upper class aspect to these stories. And it was brought up in Tolkien that he didn't really have much choice about studying and going to Oxford and having a scholarship because he couldn't afford to do anything else. That was really the path mapped out for him, so he had to do it or get a job he wasn't interested in. But there is still a definite appeal in light academia of being a little bit divorced from the rest of the world and all the cares that come with it. But at the same time, whilst there is this separation, there's still very much a sense of day-to-day purpose in being a student or an academic. I think there are a lot of ways in which modern life can feel quite haphazard and meaningless, and it's rushing past us without us really paying attention to it. But academia is the exact opposite of that. Again, getting up every morning and knowing you were going to study gives you a purpose, and it's very much a life of fulfillment and meaning. And I can very much see why that is attractive to so many people. It's one of the things I also like about creativity and being a writer. It gives me a purpose in life beyond just existing, and I find that incredibly reassuring. Now, one thing I did notice in watching Tolkien was a little bit of my own frustration creeping in. Certainly towards the end of the film, we get scenes of Tolkien essentially at work in his study with the door shut and his wife in the background taking care of their family. And I think this is a picture we get a lot from usually male 20th century writers. For me personally, as someone who spends a lot of time on childcare and who does not have an office or a study, I have very little quiet or solitude or peace, and I'm usually writing surrounded by the hubbub of family life. Having that privilege of a study door to shut is very appealing, and I think that is one thing I'm very drawn to in that academic lifestyle. But even without that peace and solitude, because that isn't something that's really achievable for me right now, I have been thinking about ways I can incorporate this academic lifestyle into my own life. Now, I don't actually want to go back to academia. I felt very strongly when I finished my undergrad degree that I did not want to go back. I didn't want to do a master's. I didn't want to be one of these people who was a perpetual student going back and doing course after course. I did almost go back and do an MA in my mid-20s, but I changed my mind, and to be honest, I'm glad I did. But I do think there are things I can personally take from the whole idea of light academia to incorporate into my own life and maybe improve it. I would like to read more widely. I do read a lot of genres of fiction already, but I would love to get into more non-fiction. I do miss reading academic texts, but honestly, there's nothing stopping me reading them right now. I would also like to spend less time online. Now, I've gone back and forth over whether I actually want to permanently quit social media, but it's become very apparent to me that I fill a lot of the gaps in my day by picking up my phone. And even if I don't spend a lot of time scrolling on social media, I do pick up my phone a lot. I might check to see if I've got email notifications. I might have a quick scroll through the news or through YouTube. And even though I'm not spending much time on my phone in any particular instance, it does all add up. And it's a big distraction. It's constantly taking my attention away from other things, even for just a few minutes at a time. And I think ultimately that is what I am reaching towards with this attraction to light academia. It's an idea of a life with purpose and meaning, and not just frittering away your time because you don't know what else to do with it. To be honest, there's a lot more I could say on this subject. It's quite a fraught one, it's an interesting one, but it also has a lot of potential. There is certainly a lot of privilege bound up in the idea of academia, and I haven't really got time to go into all of that now. But I am trying to look beyond just the aesthetics of this particular genre and find ways I can maybe incorporate it into my life. These are things that I keep coming back to and have been coming back to on and off over many months, so I'm sure these themes will crop up in vlogs in the future. I am now going to wrap this up. I know I'm not currently vlogging quite as much as I used to, but I do still love making these videos, so I will be back soon with another one. Until then, keep writing everyone, and I'll see you next time.